and welcome to 5 Steps to Success and Happiness. It's been a bit of a struggle getting this out to people, but it's a new platform for me, and I hope that we will be able to use this to our advantage in the future for many different webinars. Many of you are probably familiar with Zoom or GoToMeeting, things like that. I'm using a different platform. It's all new. It's, to me at least, it's Expertise TV. It allows me to have live webinars as well as recorded ones, as this one will be. So I hope that you will enjoy it. So let's get right to the webinar. Now you'll notice in the bottom of your screen there's a small square, and if you would like to click on full screen, you'll be able to see everything that I am showing you here. Originally we called this "So What's Your Problem?" And that's kind of the way it came out. That's not the way I meant it. I've been doing quite a bit of work lately on helping people find what's stopping them from being magnificent. It was a talk that I gave in 2015 and 16, What's Stopping You from Being Magnificent, and I hope to make a webinar into it very soon. But for right now, it's about taking responsibility for our lives. And so What's Your Problem came out in a way that wasn't quite the way I expected it to. It sounded a little flip, and that wasn't the way I meant it to be. This is about taking responsibility for our lives, about moving from being victims to being visionaries. I'd asked what you'd like to hear about in this kind of a seminar. And as usual, for many of my readers and many of my subscribers to my e-list, they wanted to know how their thoughts were really reflecting or causing or contributing to their life experience. Other people talked about forgiveness and about self-care, and also about being able to let go of things that had happened in the past and moving on to the future. So all 4 of these things are topics that we are going to cover in today's webinar in one way or the other. So let's get to the 5 steps to success and happiness. But first, let's look at why now? Why are we doing this now at this particular time? Well, almost everybody that I talk to is being affected in some way by the campaigning last year and the year before and the current political situation in the United States. It doesn't matter whether you are in the US or whether you're around the world somewhere else listening to this, we're being affected by it in one way or another. Some people have told me that they're almost numbed out, if that's a word. Ernest Holmes once used a word in one of his later talks, and he said, is that whatever word it was that he used, he said, is that a word? He says, yes, I can spell it, and I just used it, so yes, it's a word. So numbed out is my new word as to how some people are feeling and how I felt in the past. Others have felt a newly found confidence in hatred, in ways of acting out hatreds that they've been suppressing for perhaps decades. So now, just a couple of weeks, those people, quote unquote, are celebrating while many, many more people are angry, dismayed, disgusted, and empowered to change. But that last statement that includes those people and empowered to change is where we begin today. We've seen many people of faith falter completely in the last couple of weeks. Faith in God, faith in humanity, faith in the foundations of our New Thought teachings, or faith in the principles of the founding fathers of the United States. And until we get to a point where we can stop seeing those people and start seeing us more as a global community, as a people who are doing what's best for everyone concerned and not just for a few, we're not going to get to that peace that we want to be at. Now, all of this is going on. Guess what? It's all normal. Not necessarily the actions. The actions are a little bit different, but our reactions are normal. Now, some of you know me as a minister, some as a writer, some as a blogger or social worker, but I'm also trained in critical incident stress management. And what this means is that there are many times things that happen in our lives, things that get associated with eventually with PTSD, where we have to learn how to manage the stress that comes about from an accident, an incident, or something that has occurred in our life that is extremely jarring to us. Now, current events are surrounding our government that apply to almost everywhere that anyone lives in the world. Now, even though this isn't an auto accident or a plane crash or a mass shooting that we associate with CISM, it has the same components. And one of these is that we say you're having a normal response to an abnormal situation. Nothing we have seen in the last couple of months is normal by any stretch of the imagination. So we're told that we must be positive through this. We must keep a stiff upper lip. We must pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. But there's just also a negative side to being positive. Do we have to be positive all the time? Well, it's probably healthier to be positive than being negative and being sour, and you'll be a heck of a lot more fun to be around. But there is a downside. Being positive all the time can also be dangerous and even life-threatening. How? Because if we can't acknowledge where we are, we're never going to be able to get where we want to be. Here's an example. I know right now I'd like to be here. It's a beautiful location. It's in Hawaii. But if I am actually physically in Newark, in this mess, there is absolutely no amount of positive thinking or wishing or hoping that is going to get me from here to here. I'm going to have to do something. I'm going to have to get on the plane. I'm going to have to buy the ticket before I get on the plane. I'm going to have to move physically. If we continue to ignore our feelings, our physical responses, our aches, our pains, abusive relationships, a go-nowhere job, whatever, we not only will not get what we want, but we may end up damaging ourselves in the process. So let's get to these 5 steps. The 5 steps are actually what some of you may be thinking about as a form of prayer. But these 5 steps, which I'd like to cover in another webinar at some point in the very near future, are not the ones I'm talking about. I'm talking about the 5 points of power as steps. This was first introduced to me by a woman named Edwene Gaines. She's a minister in the Unity movement, and she is an amazing woman of power. These 5 points of power, though, weren't developed by her. They were developed by a man named Tolly Burkan. He's the founder of the Firewalking Institute of Research and Education and the father of the global firewalking movement. I'll actually be participating in my first firewalking ceremony a week before my birthday in May. So weather permitting and my desire to participate, I will tell you all about that after it happens. So let's get to those 5 points of power. The first one is about paying attention. Well, to what? Perfect example. I was on the George Washington Parkway driving down to Reagan Airport the other day, and I was more concerned about this pickup on the tailgate of my new car than all the stopped cars in front of me. And because of my lack of mindfulness, which would also be another good topic for a future webinar, I nearly caused a multi-car accident because I was looking in my rearview mirror instead of the cars stopped in front of me. We live in a multitasking world. We must learn to slow down. We must learn to pay attention to what's in front of us and stop trying to do all the functions at once that our computer can do that our minds have not evolved yet to be able to handle. The second is about telling the truth and telling it at the time. Now, we also get to tell it with love. My dad was one that thought that his opinions were ones that you had to know and had to know right away. In other words, if he didn't like your dress or your tie, he would tell you how awful of a choice that was. He felt that he was doing you a favor. The point here is that if we agree to do something that we don't want to do, if we don't tell the truth about our real desires, it's going to be miserable for everyone in the process. So it's to tell each other the truth of what we desire in a current situation. Are we really going to go somewhere that we don't want to go to just because we feel we quote unquote should? The third point of power is about asking for what we want and also keeping that in the present. We do so without expectation, but asking is so important, and we're not always good about doing that. Do you remember how Scripture says that ask and it will be given to you, seek and ye shall find, knock and it shall be open to you? Well, look at all those words. Ask, seek, not. A-S-K. Ask. Now, yes, I know Jesus didn't say it in English. He was speaking Aramaic at the time. I get that. But it's a wonderful way for us to remember that we have to first ask before we end up with getting anything. Maybe we think it's not appropriate. Maybe we think it's not polite. We may have trouble determining what our own needs are depending on how we've been raised. We may have been told that we're not supposed to ask for what we want. We're supposed to give them what we get, accept what we give. Let me try that one again. That we can get what is given to us in the first place. We should be satisfied with what we get. God knows we don't have enough, so here, just take this and be satisfied with it. But that's not the way the world works. There's a wonderful world out there that can provide for us, but we have to ask, we have to reach for it, and when it's given to it, we have to learn to accept it. The fourth point, second to last, is about taking responsibility. And when I say responsibility, when you hear responsibility, when you see responsibility, when you think about responsibility, think responsibility and not blame or fault. Too often in our world, we see responsibility, and immediately it goes to whose fault is this? Who do we have to blame? Now, the caveat about taking responsibility from my experience personally is that I don't always get to know what my responsibility actually was at the time of the experience. If you subscribe to my e-list for my blog and for the announcements about this webinar, I exposed or shared some very personal and somewhat tragic, some people called it, devastating experiences that I've had over the past 40 plus years. Now, they were not easy to go through, but I share them because I did not necessarily understand my level of responsibility or the level of responsibility on my part for any or all of those events at the time they occurred. Sometimes it takes weeks or months or years or even decades to fully comprehend even part of our responsibility, and even then we may not completely understand it. But here's the benefit. Whether we understand it or not, whether we want to admit it or not, when we take responsibility, not blame, not fault, we empower ourselves. We stop playing the victim, and it makes it easier to get on with our lives. I always take responsibility for my experience, not your experience, not my husband's experience, not the experience of the company I work for, not the experience of the President of the United States, my experience. And here's another side point about our experience. The experience doesn't necessarily mean what happened. It can mean how we felt about what happened. In other words, our psychological experience of a particular situation. For example, a parent's divorce can be a tragic experience for one child, whereas it can be a relief, even a joyous occasion for another child. So it's not just the act, it's how we choose to frame the situation, and that is a choice. Finally, keep our agreements. Now this goes back to step 2. If I always tell the truth and I tell it quickly, I'm not going to have a problem keeping that agreement because I'm going to agree to do something that I really want to do. Following through is a cinch. But if I don't tell you the truth, then keeping my agreement will be much, much more difficult, perhaps even impossible. I mean, I got to tell you, I really don't want to go to the NASCAR races with you. Do not invite me. I can assure you I will say no. Well, what about always? Years ago, when I taught travel school in a very different life, I made it this saying: I was living in a time and teaching at a time when the travel industry was changing so rapidly we didn't know what was going on. And this is more than a double negative. There really are few things in life that are always or never. So if always and never doesn't consistently appear in our lives, it's not that unusual. People have a problem right now in life, I think, with trying to have consistency in a world that is ever changing. So if we do have a lot of always, such as you always take the last piece of bread, or you never remember to pick up the milk, those kind of always and nevers could say, well, really, actually, what you are is a pretty big drama queen. And it doesn't sound like you want to put any responsibility on yourself for much of anything. At least that's what I say to myself. So always, in the sense of these 5 points of power, it's a goal, it's not a mandate. This will lead, however, to our success and our happiness. For taking responsibility for our lives and for our experience always will lead to happiness. Why? Because we're going to be calm, we're going to be more centered, there's going to be less chance of being affected by the outside world. And that leads to a successful life no matter what you do. So that's simple, right? Not really. Not always. At least a lot of time for a lot of us. The question is, if it's not easy and it's not simple, then how difficult do we really want to make this? I remember there's a line that Grace Jones, no, I'm not Grace Jones. What am I saying? Tina Turner in Mad Max, where she's telling Mel Gibson's character, we can do this easy or we can do this rough. Because she's the queen and she's going to tell everybody how it's going to be. So it's our choice, isn't it, in life? We can do things the hard way or we can do things the easy way. It is a choice, which is why I say that even though we have that freedom of choice, we don't have the freedom of consequence, so always choose wisely. Now, this is where I would normally switch out of a little Looney Tunes there, screen share back to full screen so that we could use question and answer. But because this is recorded, it's not going to be a Q&A at this time, although I encourage you to go ahead and to send me questions or comments if you have on this. But after the Q&A, I was going to talk to you about what's coming next. And what I have next is talking about those other 5 steps that I mentioned at the beginning of the webinar. There isn't a type of affirmative prayer. You can also call it a meditation or a contemplation or a way to center yourself. It's made up of 5 steps, and what I'd like to do is offer 2 different webinars. One's going to be beginning, or for those of you who would just like to review it or perhaps use this beginning class for a class of your own in your own center or organization or for your own webinars. And then take it into an advanced group. If you haven't taken the beginning, you're not going to understand the advanced. It's just that simple. But I'll do the beginning and wait a while, and we'll go into the advanced class. The advanced is for those of you who have been using this type of prayer, sometimes called spiritual mind treatment, for years or even for a short period of time. But it's for those of you who would like to go deeper into that to find out why it may be appearing that you're not getting the results that you want. Now, you can contact me at or see more about my work at terrydrewkeranen.com. My email is terry@terrydrewkeranen.com. If you go to that first webpage, if you're not signed up for my e-list and sign up, just have to put in your name and your email address and your zip code or country code. You'll get a free ebook just for signing up. This is the one you'll get, Freedom to Live, Enjoying Ease in the 4 Areas of Life. But you'll also start getting a Monday morning thought or meditation, which is actually a form of that affirmative prayer that I mentioned. You'll get my blog on Friday, and you'll get links to other blogs that I write throughout the week. You'll get first dibs at upcoming webinars and classes and workshops. And you'll also be directed, if you'd like to look at social media. There are a couple of Facebook pages that I post on, Twitter accounts, Instagram, LinkedIn. and just ways of keeping in touch. So that's it. I do appreciate very much, and thank you very much for going to the this webinar with me to enjoy the information that I've sent with you, hopefully, or shared with you. Please write to me at terrydurkaranen.com with, like I say, questions, answers, feedback. This is my first webinar. Be gentle. I expect to send out an email and social media an announcement on how you can view future webinars. I look forward to talking to you again real soon, and thanks for taking the time to view this. Thanks again for those of you who tried to show up last Thursday when it didn't work quite the way I thought it was, and hope to talk to you soon.